My name is Victoria Moretti. I'm a dating and relationship coach and matchmaker. I work with clients one-on-one, I work with couples, I do group coaching programs, and I also have a course. And today I'm going to talk to you about attachment styles. There are 4 major attachment styles that I'm going to go through today. And this is a body of work that was really started by John Bowlby and later furthered by Mary Ainsworth. And attachment simply means that the way that we grew up from our infancy, from our childhood, or our past events that occurred within our life really has impacted the way that we now attach and relate to people in our romantic relationships and other relationships in general in our life. So the first style that I'm going to go through is secure attachment. But I want to just say that if you find yourself that you resonate with any of the insecure attachment styles, it doesn't mean that you have a disorder. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. I want to say that it is absolutely possible to heal and develop a secure attachment and a secure partnership with people if you find yourself there, right? So there's many ways that we can increase our neural plasticity and really reroute those neural pathways to become more secure in ourselves, right? And so I also want to give more tools in these videos so that you are more informed of your patterns, of what's coming up, of how this impacts your life, and tools how you can become more secure, and also tools so that you can recognize the different attachment styles within your romantic partner or friends or other relationships that you have in your life, so that you can have more tools for connecting with that person as well. So the first style that I'm going to go into is called secure attachment. This is kind of the good one that we all want to strive for. So this one is someone who is very comfortable with relationships, right? They're really relaxed with relationships. They generally believe they're a good thing. They're something that adds value to their life. They're really comfortable with others. They are really much expecting that, relationships will generally be a good thing, right? And that people are trustworthy and can be relied on. And there's a lot of benefits that come out of relationships. It's this person that can be really comfortable and relaxed having alone time and really comfortable, having quality time with their partner. And transitions between those two things are easy. They are the person that is really comfortable articulating their needs and asking for what they want and putting boundaries in place. Their caregivers probably really heard them for their needs. They were good with reflecting back their emotions and helping them kind of have tools to work through those emotions. They respected their boundaries, right? So this person is really good about communicating what they want, but also negotiating their needs with others and making sure that they can kind of collaborate with others to make sure everyone's kind of getting what they need within the relationship. This person is also in romantic relationships really good with conflict resolution, with repair, good at speaking up. They're not, assuming people will read their mind, right? They're really good at kind of putting things out on the table and hashing things out. They're really good at being affectionate. They are really good with eye contact and maintaining closeness with their partners. They're good with intimacy of every form. They can be really playful with their partners, right? They can be really lighthearted, like even through conflict, they can kind of make a joke or, one moment say, gosh, you really annoy me. And, that person says, gosh, you really annoy me sometimes too. And they can kind of laugh about it, right? And not everything is so serious, right? They can really be playful and kind of joke around and have fun together. This person also is really resilient in the relationship, right? So it's hard for them to really give up on the relationship. They're really going to try. They know that there's going to be periods of dissatisfaction. They know there's going to be conflict, and that doesn't mean that it's not the right person, right? They can be comfortable with going through these phases of potential dissatisfaction and coming back. And so it's really hard for them to really give up. But of course, everyone has their limits, and they might from time to time, right? And if they do and they break up with someone, they generally have this expectation that they're going to find someone new and it's going to be all right, right? They're really flexible and resilient in those ways. They also have a tendency to be more fulfilled in their relationships. One of the biggest common denominators of people who are satisfied in their relationships is that they're satisfied and fulfilled in their own life, right? And have that mindset of being grateful for what they already have and appreciating what they already have, right? So when they bring that mindset to a partnership, they appreciate the good parts about their partner. They appreciate the good in the relationship. They're not always focusing on the bad or what's going wrong and nitpicking every single little thing. They can kind of have a balanced approach where they're really seeing the good and making use of that good and taking advantage of that and bringing that forth. And they're really seeing their partner as their beloved, right? They're not seeing their partner as the enemy or, assuming that because they did this thing yesterday or before that they're always going to be that way, right? They're good about giving their partner the benefit of the doubt and really seeing the good. And that kind of creates this kind of like exponential effect where when they see the good, it really makes them see more and more good and experience more and more good in their connection and in their relationship. So really good about, finding the win-win in solutions, in conflict and in repair, and really, being good about like staying in it and working through things with their partner. Lastly, because they feel safe at home, they feel really safe to be able to go out into the world and live their dreams, right? And take risk and go after their goals, right? So they're, really apt to just go and be fulfilled as an individual person because they know things are good at home. Okay, the next style we're going to go into is anxious preoccupied or anxious. So this is the person that really didn't get sufficient co-regulation as a child, so they really didn't fully develop their ability to self-regulate. Their main fear is a fear of abandonment, and it really just means that they really got some good, nourishing contact and attention from their caregivers, but the meeting of their needs or the emotional attunement was inconsistent, right? So it was there sometimes and not there other times. And that kind of creates this external focus that the anxious attacher has. And the want to like seek closeness, and they really value relationship because they don't know when it's going to happen for them. They don't know when it's going to come back, right? It's this hyper focused of, are they going to love me? Do they love me enough? And are they going to love me tomorrow? And this also creates this lack of object permanency because it's like they struggle to, when their caregiver kind of goes into the next room, they don't know if their caregiver exists anymore, right? That object is no longer permanent. It's disappeared. They don't know if it's going to come back due to this conditioning, right? So even in relationship, they struggle to know if they haven't heard from their partner for a couple of days, do they still love me? Is everything still okay, right? And they really struggle to kind of see things as they were when they left off. This externally focused mindset also kind of plays into their relationships in a way that they're constantly thinking about the other person in the relationship, right? So they're constantly saying, I wonder what they're feeling. What are they doing? Like, is everything okay over there? Like, are we on track? Like, have they changed their mind? They're constantly kind of asking themselves and focused and thinking about the other person in the relationship. And they're really, really good at picking up on changes in others because of their, hyper focus and hyper aware on the external. So they can notice when, oh my gosh, they made a weird look, or, something's wrong, something shifted, but they're actually really bad about interpreting those social cues and changes. They tend to interpret them negatively and take things personally. So they might think things like, oh, they don't like me anymore. Oh, they're mad at me. That pissed them off. and maybe they don't feel the same way, right? So they're constantly making these assumptions and negative stories and kind of like keeping track of like the pros and cons, because of this like general mistrust that was created because of this inconsistent kind of attunement and meeting of needs in their childhood, right? So that mistrust leads them to, ask a lot of questions, kind of like test the relationship, whether they're trying to or not. They really need a lot of reassurance. They're constantly kind of like tracking what's going right and what's going wrong. So they need a lot of that reassurance in their relationships to really feel safe and secure. They, if they get into conflict, they want to resolve things right then and there to make sure that they're in good standing with their partner. And they also have a tendency to want to merge with their partner, right? They are always kind of wanting closeness and to really spend time with their partner. So they might actually start they might start losing themselves in the relationship to kind of merge with their partner's interests and hobbies and habits and, okay, that's a good time for you, then I'll do that then. We can hang out here, So it's good for the anxious attacher to kind of have a good balance of, okay, I'm going to have alone time or time for myself and my interests, and also have time for the partnership, right? And kind of reminding themselves of, what are the things that, what do I want? What do I need? What are my boundaries, right? What are the things that light me up and bring me joy in my day? And am I still doing those things? And it's also really good for them to also focus on activities that bring them back to themselves, right? And make them be more centered. So things like meditation, breathing exercises, yoga, exercise, any of those things that kind of help them be grounded and centered in them is also very helpful. One thing that anxious attachers struggle with in relationships is receiving the care and reassurance and love that they do get. So even when they do get attention or a compliment, or their partner tells them how much they love them, they play this game called the yeah buts, right? They really struggle to receive it. It's almost like they get the love and they throw it away because their default is this place of not having it, right? And kind of chasing it. And having kind of a lower self-esteem that I need to kind of like earn my love. So yeah, they might like, maybe their partner gives them flowers and they're like, yeah, but it's not the flowers that I really love, right? So that means that they don't pay attention and they don't really care for me, and they don't, they're not really reliable. Or they might hear something really nice from their partner that means that, they really love them, and they say, yeah, but they said this thing yesterday, so can I really believe it, right? Can I really trust it? Is it really gonna like be there tomorrow? So they really struggle to kind of receive, right? So it's a good practice for my anxious attachers to, when that love and care comes their way, to really sit in it and feel nourished by it, and let it like soak in like you're a sponge, and really like dial up the volume to really feeling that care and love and sitting in it for a second. And that kind of feeling fulfilled and satisfied and nourished feeling is a secure attachment trait, right? So that's a muscle that they can really, adapt to and build, that they might not be as good at. Another thing is, because they, weren't as good at, their caregivers weren't as good at co-regulation with them, they struggle with self-regulation, right? So working with even a professional, right, to find out what are my activations, what are my triggers, how can I heal in those, and how can I self-regulate? So I'm kind of bringing my whole, complete, kind of regulated self to the relationship, right? And I'm not kind of using my partner to regulate for me all of the time. It is very healthy to have two partners that co-regulate, that meet each other's needs, that come to each other with their insecurities and help each other through it. But the anxious attacher might go to the extreme of wanting their partner to kind of fix it for them, or be there, or fulfill every single need. And so it's for the anxious attacher to become a little bit more balanced, to say, okay, what are some areas where I can meet my own needs? And then the rest of those, maybe my relationship and my partner can also help me with those too. So co-regulation needs two regulating parties to do that, right? It's not, I'm not co-regulated and you're regulated, so you're going to regulate for me, right? It's really kind of identifying how can I regulate myself, what's going on for me, so that I can kind of bring that balance and then regulate with my partner as well. Lastly, one thing that the anxious attacher also struggles with is, they really want that love, and sometimes they're hyper vigilant on their partner and their moods and their states and worrying about if everything's okay. So they might kind of self-abandon their own wants and needs for the sake of a partnership. And sometimes they might, really, let things go, and then things kind of can tend to build. And then when they do communicate their needs, it might come out really strong and really direct and really from a place of urgency or a stern tone, or like looking down at my partner or shunning them or judging them, like you should be doing this, I can't believe, da-da-da-da. And so in terms of like communicating with a partner, this is kind of where the anxious attacher can really strive to learn about how they come off and how they articulate their needs, that their needs are reasonable, and they have every right to ask for their need, and just recognizing how they can come to their partner in a gentle way and in a soft startup, in a way that is appreciative and not blaming, or in a way that's really inviting for their partner to meet their needs and collaborate with them. Okay, so the next style we're going to talk about is dismissive avoidant or avoidant. And there are many reasons or ways that one can develop an avoidant attachment system. Generally, it is from a sense of having emotional neglect. And neglect that was consistent, right? The anxious attacher had an inconsistent kind of nourishment and good contact from their caregivers, but the neglect that the avoidant feels is consistent. So it could be emotional neglect, it could be a lack of touch, it could be from a lack of like face-to-face contact with their caregivers, and isolation, just parents being not present with the child enough. It could be from an expressive dissonance, meaning their facial expressions didn't match their emotions, right? So that was confusing to the child and felt maybe dismissive or rejection. A general sense of rejection, right? So it could be from, a baby expressing a need or an emotion and feeling rejected, right? You can picture maybe a baby in their crib kind of looking up at mom and, needing something, so sharing an emotion, or maybe even, wanting to connect with mom and making a smile. And maybe mom has like a blank stare back, or maybe, makes a scrunched like face of disapproval to the child. So the child then internalizes that reaction from the caregiver and says, what am I doing wrong to kind of like disturb this connection I have with mom or my caregiver, right? So the baby says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and self-abandon, right? I will just abandon my needs and abandon my wants so that I can maintain this connection in some way, shape, or form, right? Kids make it about themselves, right? So they think, what am I doing wrong that's creating this reaction? And so they will abandon themselves, right? And so they essentially will abandon themselves. They feel a lot of shame that like they're wrong for, their emotions, or their needs are wrong. So then they grow up to become really, really self-reliant, right? They attend to their own needs. It's hard for them to ask for help. They tend to their own emotions, meaning they just kind of distract from their emotions entirely. Maybe they focus on, their interests, their work, their hobbies. Maybe they'll go off into like a fantasy land of like video games or movies or characters to kind of distract from their emotions entirely, because they kind of learned that it wasn't okay. right? There's other people that kind of talk about it as if like there's like two different buckets. So there's the avoidant that kind of like grew up in this household of like feelings are like blah, like emotions are bad taste, right? So everyone just kind of keep it to themselves and fend for themselves. Like you don't bring up that topic, right, amongst each other. So that person really doesn't, develop a strong sense of what they're feeling because they didn't have that caregiver that kind of reflected back their emotions to say, oh, you're feeling anger. It's normal to feel anger. Here are some tools that, you can be helpful to work through this anger, right? They didn't really teach them how to kind of like, co-regulate or even know what they're feeling, right? So that person, a lot of times with their romantic partners, their partners are like, you're so secretive, you're withholding how you feel. But really for that person, it's like, how can I tell you how I'm feeling if I don't even understand my inner world myself, right? How can I share my inner world if I don't really understand it fully myself, right? So there's that avoidant. And then there's the avoidant that maybe their household, they did know about their emotions, right? They are in tune with themselves emotionally, but there was this like kind of lack of boundaries in the household. It was like a boundarylessness kind of going on in the household where, let's say, for example, maybe mom kind of was always kind of in her emotions and her needs and putting that on the kids. And so the kid, is having to kind of be parentified, maybe even in a way to kind of regulate mom or always, handle what's going on with mom. And there wasn't this like healthy amount of boundaries there. And so now the kid had to really put its rigid boundaries in place, and especially with romantic relationships, to say, okay, to not lose myself and maintain some self of some form of independence and self, I'm going to, put in rigid boundaries. And in a romantic relationship, this might look like, really keeping someone at arm's length the whole time because they're afraid that if they get too close, that intimacy might mean that they'll lose themselves and their freedom and their independence. And that this person really learned that like intimacy is painful, right? Intimacy is hard. Intimacy is a bad thing, right? So, kudos to all these kids who are so resilient as kids to really develop these strategies to maintain connection with their caregivers in this way. But now we've learned that some of these tendencies doesn't really serve them in their romantic relationships to really build a healthy and secure partnership. So what do? They become self-reliant. They kind of look to themselves to fulfill their needs. They're not good about expressing their emotions, asking for help. They kind of like have these like silent contracts in their partnerships where they say, okay, I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z, and then I expect them to kind of like do this, right? So like if I just do that, then I'll get my way, right? But they don't make it explicit, right? So that can actually lead to a lot of resentments in partnership, right? Where that other person doesn't realize that they're just doing certain things to expect, to be acting in a certain way, and they might fail to do that because that person never really stated that that's what they need or what they want from their partner. So they enter into silent contracts, and then they also play this game of like being perfect so that they can stay safe, right? Because opening up and sharing their emotions, they're afraid of like getting rejected again, right? That's their biggest fear, right? If I actually open up and share or ask for something and I get rejected, like then that fear comes up all over again. So that's really hard, right? So you'll see a lot of avoidants be really good at like, being vulnerable and sharing and connecting in the beginning of a relationship, but then when things get closer, they'll go ahead and sabotage that connection and say, wait a second, this probably isn't safe, right? If they have to feel too much or actually ask for what they need, they think, oh, that's not safe to go there. So they'll sabotage and, be safer on their own. So they have difficulty with intimacy. They have difficulty with hearing other people's emotions, for holding space for that. Conflict is really hard. They might not have the capacity for it. They might not have the tools for it. They need a lot of space to kind of go back to their own little island and regulate, since they're not good with co-regulation and weren't taught that. So they do need a lot of alone time to kind of recharge and kind of do all that stuff that like keeps them maintained as an individual. So yeah, because they value their independence and their freedom, they do have this fear of commitment, right? That intimacy means something might get taken away, they might lose themselves. And they formulate a lot of deactivation strategies. And so these are like conscious or unconscious things that they do to kind of allow themselves to separate from their partners a little bit, to kind of go back to what feels safe, to go back to being alone. It's like in some moments their attachment system feels like, oh, we're getting too close, this is too much, could something bad could happen. So they do these certain things so that their attachment system can feel relief and they can kind of go back to themselves, which feels safe, right? So these things could be like abruptly stopping in the middle of a conversation and needing to hang up the phone. It could be, they're all of a sudden hanging out with you and it's like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to go. Okay, see you later. It could be just needing space after spending some time with you. Or it could be like criticizing, their partner for being needy. It could be, a flaw finding, right? Finding faults in their partner, kind of picking them apart, saying, see, this is the reason that you're not trustworthy or not reliable or you're not a good partner, right? And finding all the reasons why they're not a good fit so they can go back to being alone, which feels safer for them. It could be looking down on them, acting superior, seeking perfectionism in not only their partner, but in the relationship, right? It's feeling like, if they were the good, perfect partner, then we wouldn't have conflict, right? We wouldn't have these problems. I wouldn't be, having to feel suffocated and smothered, and feel uncomfortable that you're sharing your emotions with me, right? Like if you were perfect, then I wouldn't feel any of this discomfort, right? And that's just not realistic. There is no like perfect unicorn of a person that just knows all your needs, knows all your wants, knows all your boundaries, knows what you need and how much of it and when to stop, right? Like that person doesn't exist, right? We need to teach our partners how to love us. So that's kind of the fantasy of the avoidant, to like meet this perfect unicorn of a person that you would just treat them exactly right and nothing will ever go wrong, right? But that's just never going to happen, right? So seeking perfectionism is really just a method to kind of just like keep you from being alone, or keep you being alone, keep you being single, and finding all these faults really feels like it's real, right? Like these things are important, and it's not my fault that I found this flaw and I have to go back to being alone and I found this dead end. Like, oh, found a dead end, like guess I have to keep searching, right? It's like, what a creative way to like always be alone. If like I never find the perfect person, I never have to settle down and I never have to confront this discomfort of like intimacy and actually like depending on someone in creating that kind of secure partnership. A lot of times it's grass is greener, right? So kind of like idealizing this perfect partner that, maybe I just need to be with someone like them, right? Like with them, none of this would happen. Or we can even like fantasize our past partners, right? It's, the one that got away, right? Now that I have some distance between me and my ex, I'm no longer feeling like they're needy, I'm put upon, I'm pressured. I'm no longer feeling that pressure. So now I can kind of see all the good parts of that relationship and all the good parts of that person. And my attachment system isn't feeling put upon, right? So now I can kind of see it in a different light, and I think, oh shoot, maybe they were the one, and with them, maybe it would have really worked with them. And now, now they're gone, right? And with my current partner, but I'm thinking about my ex, right? And that's a way to kind of disconnect from my current partner, right? But if I just went back to my ex, the same thing would happen all over again, because it's my attachment system that's getting poked, right, within intimacy. So it would just start the cycle all over again. Other things are kind of minimizing the importance of relationships, devaluing my partner, having really, really rigid boundaries and routines, and like not accepting influence and not, straying away from any of those things, comparing partners to others, distracting with work and hobbies, is a way to kind of, detach, avoiding conflict, avoiding intimacy, any of those things. And the thing is, cheating on partners, the thing is, any of these deactivation strategies, if we focus on the one strategy and overanalyze why we're doing that one thing, like we're kind of missing the point, right? Like even if I solved for one strategy, if I don't heal my attachment wounds, I'm probably just, it's going to be like a whack-a-mole. Like I'll just, my attachment system will just think of another one to do, right? So it's kind of missing the point if you overanalyze it, the like fault that you find or whatever. It's more important to find out why in intimacy you feel smothered, right? And tackling the wound that creates you feeling like you're put upon and suffocated and smothered when in connection, right? And so that's what I help my clients do to heal through that wound. So we solve all of it, and these strategies really kind of like lessen their hold on them. But of course, like some of these things are really important. Say if you find flaws in a partner, sometimes it is realizing, okay, is this something I really need to have in a partnership? And it demonstrates like a value that I really want to share with a partner. Or am I just trying to pick them apart and I don't really need this, but I'm using it as a reason to disconnect? Okay, so 3 things for an avoidant to kind of work on and focus on. Number 1, feeling your feelings, right? Being connected to what's going on in your internal world, being fluent with your emotions, kind of really taking it upon yourself to be able to feel, not be in your head all the time. Or even when you're, talking about things with your partner, be wary of going to logic all the time, right? And avoiding those emotional conversations. I know conflict is hard, but you can develop the muscle where it can be easier over time. The other thing that avoidants can tend to do in conflict is, because of their fear of rejection and not being good enough, they can really internalize any needs or requests or complaints from their partner as criticism. So they're really sensitive to criticism, and they'll often go into defensiveness because they any kind of perceived criticism they interpret as like, I'm failing as a partner, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, right? And so they will want to defend their side of things to kind of prove, no, I am a good partner. No, it's just that you have got it wrong, right? So then they don't have to feel that shame come up again and have to feel like they did a bad job and like they're failing, right? So they might rationalize, justify, deflect, minimize, become the victim, deflect to something else. So beware of that. And the thing that I suggest for my avoidants to do instead is, if your partner comes to you with something, to hear them out, acknowledge them, and validate them, and provide empathy. Empathy does not mean that you have to agree. It just means, okay, I can see how you feel that way given your experience of the situation. And after you give empathy and they feel heard and understood, you can also state your side. And then you can say, okay, this was not my intent, or this is what I felt, or this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. And then they can give empathy to you. And in that way, you can both win, and it's not either or, right? But they feel heard. And a lot of times you don't even need to do anything different for them, but that empathy can really go a long way to making them feel like, oh, okay, you've got me, like you're my partner and you care and I matter. So that's number 1. Number 2 is practicing expressing your needs and your wants. Do it in small ways. What are small risks that you can take to rely on partners, to share about your day, to share about your struggles, to share about what's going on for you? You know, someone offers to, drop you off at the airport, say yes every once in a while, right? What are the little ways that you can have people show up for you? And make sure that you are doing what you can to not feel smothered and put upon in the relationship. If you need your independence, you need your alone time, you need your space, or you need your boundaries for the things that are important to you, speak up and ask for those. Don't just assume that someone's not going to be able to do that. Give them a chance, right? And it's up to you to put those pillars in your life and in your relationship such that the relationship can work for you and you can get both. And then lastly, be aware of what your deactivation strategies are and the ones that you typically go to, and kind of check in with yourself when they come up to say, maybe this is, my attachment system. Is this really true, what I'm thinking? Can I see the good in my partner? Or even, what's been happening lately? Maybe it's, you don't live with your partner yet and you just went on vacation with them, or you spent all this time with them, and then you get back from the vacation, all of a sudden you think this will never work. I can never be with them. They're the worst partner for me. And maybe it's just your attachment system flagging to you that you need a little bit of a breather and you need some alone time and you need some space, right? So get your space. Don't extrapolate on other people. Get your space, get your alone time, and then think about it. And if a few days later you still feel the same way, okay, then maybe talk to someone about it, right? See a professional, see if you can kind of get a different perspective so that you can, sift through your thoughts that can be really confusing to see what is what and get clarity on whether this person can be good for you, or if they're not a good fit. And then lastly, it's the fearful avoidant attachment style, or what some people call disorganized, or some people refer to as unresolved trauma. This could be created for many reasons, but generally there is a lot of trauma in the household, or maybe a lot of chaos. There's a lot of trust wounds that were created. Perhaps the caregiver was a source of both fear and comfort, right? They went to that person for safety, but that person was also a sense of threat in their life, right? So they really developed this belief that love and relationships were difficult, right? They're painful. And it kind of creates this thing of this person really, really wants love and connection, but also when they experience that connection, they don't feel safe, right? Because they learned that it was painful, that it was harmful, that it was hurtful, that it was confusing. So it develops this person that in their romantic lives, they really, really want love and connection, and they're actually really good about being vulnerable in the beginning, asking good questions, really getting to know someone, really opening up and kind of developing this great connection. But then all of a sudden they remember, oh my gosh, relationships can be really harmful. This person can really hurt me. So they'll do things like self-sabotage or pull away. And so then they kind of go back to safety. But then they remember, oh wait, no, I really wanted that. So then they maybe go back in again, right? So it's this kind of push-pull scenario that gets created. And they kind of grew up with a lot of mixed signals, right? Their caregivers really were a source of safety and connection and comfort, but also a sense of threat and fear and confusion and harm, right? So it kind of creates this because they received mixed signals kind of growing up, now they really give mixed signals in their love life. And it creates a really confusing experience for both themselves and their partners. In a chronic state, so the chronic fearful avoidant state means that they can really demonstrate both tendencies of an anxious attacher and an avoidant, and they might oscillate between those two, and they might not even be able to kind of discern the pattern or the activations that make them flip within one or the other. So again, that can be really confusing for them and their partner of what causes them to switch and what triggers them or what their activations even are. And so number one, it's like a dual approach of healing, right? That all of the information and the tools that might help an anxious person might help them, and the tools that might help an avoidant person might land and resonate and help with them too. But it's also kind of, getting the healing to become more secure, or even being able to detect some of those triggers and activations so that they can heal those and start to navigate their relationships a little smoother and a little bit easier. The other type is someone who's not chronic fearful avoidant, but perhaps situationally fearful avoidant. So this person might have like an anxious or secure or avoidant base, but there are situations that activate them into a more fearful avoidant response. So an FA response are things like dissociation, freeze response. It's really disorienting. It can be really confusing. They can get into a fogginess. They can kind of lose their ability to speak. They want to speak up and express themselves, but they don't know how. They feel frozen. They might lose their ability to hear. It's like all of a sudden things become too overwhelming, and it's like they're hearing things like Charlie Brown, like want, 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 want. It's just a very kind of disorienting experience when they're in that fearful avoidant response. So it's really helpful to kind of work with a professional or someone to help them heal some of these wounds, to become more secure and be able to navigate their relationships with more ease. The way to heal a fearful avoidant attachment, it's difficult and it takes time because what happens is essentially their attachment system, right? That system for connection and love gets commingled and tangled with their threat response, right? They learned that love and relationships are also harmful, right? So they have to essentially detangle their threat response from the attachment system so that they can learn that relationships can be safe and people can be trusted, and that they can do that and be more secure and feel safe within their connections, right? So sometimes in healing that with my clients, what we do is if we're having a corrective experience, perhaps with the past event or wound that we find, it's really healing for their threat response first so they can get into safety, because no one can really reach their secure functioning when they're in that like fight or flight or threat response. So healing their threat response first, then we can go into their attachment system and their attachment wounds and healing those attachment wounds that exist for them as well. So it's kind of a dual approach. A few things that would help a fearful avoidant if you're in a relationship with them. So number one, again, like I said, in the beginning, they're really good at connection. They're really good at getting to know you. They ask good questions. They're really curious. So what makes them feel safe and like they can trust the connection is that you're like that back to them, right? So ask good questions, be curious about them, really let them feel like you want to get to know them as well, and that they matter to you and they're important. This makes them feel like, okay, this is like a safe connection that I can feel good with. Number two, because they have a tendency to say, oh my gosh, oh no, like I really like them, now they can really hurt me, right? And self-sabotage or pull away or do these confusing mixed signals. They can really benefit from someone that can be patient with them, and kind of roll with the punches of those hesitations that they have, and really be empathetic towards what they're experiencing, especially in the beginning before they can kind of reach that safety point. And number three, they really benefit from consistency. Someone who is clear and direct in their communication, right? When they get into those responses, they get into a lot of confusion, right? So someone who can articulate things in a clear way, be really direct, give good instructions, be really clear, not give too many choices where you're confusing them. all of those things can go a really long way for them to feel safe and just be able to navigate their relationship a little bit easier for them. And then lastly, obviously, knowing your triggers, and healing through your trauma or those past events and wounds that are kind of inflicting this attachment style in this way of navigating relationships is really helpful for the fearful avoidant. So I want to reiterate that you can absolutely heal and develop a secure attachment style and secure partnership with your partner. I have a tendency to say all the anxious attackers kind of do the same 10 to 15 tendencies and habits and patterns, and all the avoidants kind of do the same 10 to 15 things that they do, but we're all very unique into what activates us or triggers us into these attachment wounds, right? So it's my work to work with clients to find out what specifically activated them into each of these tendencies so that we can find out where that came from and heal it from the root. And in that way, you can develop a more secure attachment, and you will be less and less activated, right? With less frequency and less intensity over time. And hopefully, decrease your suffering and navigate your relationships with more ease. I also want to mention that attachment styles it's all relative, right? We're on a spectrum. Just because I'm, anxious or avoidant doesn't mean I do all the same things, right? You could be a little bit anxious or extremely anxious, right? And it might bring out, different types of tendencies. And it's also relative to the dynamic that's created between two people, right? So number one, even if I'm secure, I might have anxious and avoidant tendencies, right? We're all on a spectrum. But, if I'm, let's say, a little bit anxious and I'm with someone who's really avoidant, I might become more extremely anxious because I'm reacting to that extremely avoidant person. If I'm a little bit anxious and I'm with someone who is extremely anxious, I might actually start becoming a little bit avoidant towards them because of their strong anxious attachment. Even if I'm secure, right? If I'm with someone who's extremely avoidant, I might start becoming a little bit anxious, right? So it's all depending on the dynamic that's created between two people. So I really just want to put together more of these videos so that you guys can learn and get more information about all the styles so that you can detect which ones resonate with you so that you can have more tools at your disposal to learn how to navigate through those patterns, to find ways that you can heal to become more secure, but also to recognize the style of maybe your partner or other people in your life, and find different tools to communicate with them and connect with them in a better way, knowing the anxieties or fears of both parties, how to really kind of make that work, and make that kind of dynamic successful. I have a website where I have a course where I have more tools, where you can kind of take a quiz to know what your attachment style is. And through these videos, I'm going to share more information, but also my personal stories and share a little bit about my journey of how I came to this body of work, how it's been for me to become to healing and become more secure in myself. And so I hope that you guys can learn from that and take something away from it. And so thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you all very soon, and feel free to subscribe so that you get all the good content right away.